Central Fire and West Brattleboro Fire is where the majority of changes came. And again, with some of the numbers that changed in West B had to do, the only change that was, the change in West Brattleboro was we removed the building that had the EOC. That actually has resulted, the West Brattleboro site right now is at about 1.5 million. From a couple of meetings ago, that's down about 100,000, if not a little bit more. And that's due primarily really to the removal of that building and to changes in the site plan. We reduced the parking lot, etc. So it was those types of changes. The Central Fire, again, there was some savings there. Some of that savings is actually just because we went back through and firmed up numbers, firmed up a lot of different numbers, and so there's essentially a savings in that of about 173,000. The number on the Central is right now at about 6.9 million, almost 7 million. The total for the three buildings in all is at 14.1 million. I believe when the board last saw it, full board last saw it, we were at about 14.5, 14.6 million. Changes with the EOC and reviewing numbers, some of the site work changes that occurred then have gotten us down to that 13.1 million. With regard to the financial discussions and the review, I think that just to let people know the process, as I said, we had two meetings. The chair and the vice chair, David and Dick, were at both of those meetings, and it was just discussion, and I will let Dick and David speak for themselves, but I feel that at the 14.1, it's a pretty solid number.
David, would you like to say anything?
I can certainly speak to what I see in the budgets here and the bases for most of the changes between the numbers that were previously presented and how these budgets are constructed. And then really, Bob, who's been working on the budgeting process, consulting with the town, may want to weigh in a little bit about just the way in which the numbers were constructed and how numbers in general are constructed at this phase of a proposed project. I think that the primary changes that were made as a result of our due diligence during the last two meetings with the chair and the vice chair of the select board and representatives from the contractor, from police and fire, and the town manager, the assistant town manager, were that there had been a lot of back and forth previously about the construction of the basement and renovation of the basement here in Town Hall for the police station. And those numbers have been clarified, and any duplication that may have existed in the previous construction of the budget has been removed. This board had requested that the EOC be moved from West Brattleboro into Central. Some money in the process from reciting the Emergency Operations Center. I think some of the other changes or some of the other questions that we asked had to do with the ventilation systems. We questioned whether there was a need for new ventilation systems in West Brattleboro. The new station would house the trucks, or the new building would house the trucks, and the old building would only be used, if I'm not mistaken, Pete, for storage of trailers and the like. And that's what would happen under the new plan. Nevertheless, we do need the new ventilation systems, given the current status of those ventilation systems out in West Brattleboro. one of the larger cost savings had to do with the elevator. That's been eliminated here at the police station. Rather than having an elevator, we're just going to have a lift that would be necessary because of some differential in the levels of the floors. So I think that we've pretty much brought the budgets down as far as they can go in order to conform with the project as it's ticket or big number items in these budgets as they're built, and it's my understanding that they're standard for the way in which budgets like this are put together. For example, there's a $375,000 general conditions item for the police station, $405,000 for central fire, and $150,000 general conditions for West Brattleboro Fire Station. And essentially the contractor needs to mobilize, needs to put up a construction trailer, and there needs to be a supervisor or clerk of the works at that location for each of these three projects. And I think that there's probably more costs than we otherwise would have expected if the project had opened at one location, because we have to set up for those separately at each of the three locations. So there's some increased cost as a result of that. And also at the end of each of these budgets, there's substantial numbers for the liability coverage and, hold on a second, for liability and project administration and contingency. We've got about $1 million of the $1 million of the central fire is for contingency and liability. And so we've got about, I would say, a total of 18% markup for each of these three projects for contingency and project administration, which is a pretty big number as well. All in all, I think that the construction of the buildings, piece by piece, is less when viewed without those numbers.
Just so people do understand, the numbers were done by a cost estimator, and what people do at this stage of the game. These are not, these are the kind of, this is really very preliminary. These are the numbers that we would take to a bond vote, but there is not, these numbers include the final design. These numbers also include the final design, the construction, the and as well as any upfit that might be required in the buildings. The cost estimator, who is a separate firm from either the architect or the engineer, they use a standard called the means book that is used, and it's a kind of a way to standardize construction costs to get these types of estimates. There are many decisions that need to be made still in the future, but that those decisions would be made after the bond, after the project is moving forward, because there's substantial costs going to a final design. Bob, I don't know.
I was going to say, you summarized that very well. You know, this is the process, and every project, you end up at a feasibility level, which is where you are right now, where you've probably done about 10% of the design and you're trying to fix the final price. So you do enough design to pull real, you know, are we meeting the program needs of space and functional requirements? Are we meeting the code requirements? So a lot of the drivers in this are, how do you get up to today's code? And then you send that out to a cost estimator who has to read into it and come up with a budget for you. And that budget is what you've got before you, budget with appropriate markups. As David said, general conditions, overhead and profit are fairly standard in the industry. We sort of know what those are going to be, the cost to manage the construction project, essentially. And then the contingency is always a factor at this level because it's not a final design. It hasn't gone out to bid yet. That is built into your budget so that, you know, we cover what we don't know sitting here today. There's a lot more work that has to get done. If the bond is approved, and this is the budget going forward, it's important to note that the project will be fully designed. all of the design work will be done, hundreds of thousands of dollars worth of work to do that, and then it goes out to bid. And then you're getting bid prices on the final design, and that's how you come up with a firm price. But to come up with a budget, you have to sort of do it this way. Feasibility level design, professional cost estimators, contingencies, set your budget, and then we live with that budget. This budget will be the amount that gets spent, and you have to sort of design within that. So.
There's also an allowance in the police department budget for $150,000 for the relocation of the planning department, which would be moving downstairs, taking over one of the sections on, which would be the western side of the building, northwest sides of the building, and so there needed to be monies put in here so we could do that portion of it. I would concur with everything that David said. As we were going through line by line, we were looking for any redundancies in terms of the EOC, which had numbers in West Brattleboro, and some of the things that were taken out. We picked up a couple of items. So all in all, it was a good effort, team effort, with everybody being very cognizant that we realized that this is a significant cost, and to get this as low as humanly possible, but being mindful that there are needs of both police and fire that we have to make sure that we address in this project. And it's so I thought that everyone did yeoman's work here, and I appreciate everyone's effort. So Barb, I'll turn this back over to you.
Go into schematics.
Well, unless people have questions about financials, maybe we should do it that way. Maybe if there's questions at this point about finances.
Dora?
Explain clerk of the works to me, because we're talking about $75,000 total, 15, 30, and 30.
Okay.
I mean, because we can, are we really doing all three projects at the same time?
Either you're going to have a clerk of the works for each of the projects, whether they're all done at the same time or not, and they're going to have a separate cost associated with each. And the clerk of the works is a necessary part. It is the person that essentially is the protector of the owner, essentially of the town, for staying on top of the contractor, being the go-between for the contractor and the engineers or architects, resolving issues, the voice of assistance with regard to any change orders. So the clerk of the works is a pretty important position.
I didn't ask if it was an important position. I'm asking about the cost.
Bob?
No, you asked what the person did.
Well, yeah, I was going to answer it the same way, which is what is a clerk? Generally, these days, the clerk of the works usually works for the owner, works for the town, as opposed to the architect or the contractor. And depending on the size of the project, when you get into a multi-million-dollar project, you typically want to have or need to have somebody who's sort of full-time out there every day. Unless you had somebody from staff you could assign to that role, it's a sort of a necessary piece for, as Barbara said, quality control and other things. I generally use a rule of thumb of about 2% of the construction cost, which would be a lot bigger number than this. I think it's a bigger project, so the number is sort of reflected lower. It's an hourly cost based on the duration is what ends up happening. And if you look at the co-op project or the school projects, those are examples where we've had clerk of the works, where the owner's hired somebody in that role, and this seems pretty reasonable as a cost from our experience. You asked about, do you do all of these at once, or do you do them, one sequentially after the other? Generally, I think that may be more of a question of sequencing. From a cost standpoint, it might be more cost effective to do them at once. part of that general conditions is the contractor's project manager and superintendent, and the longer the duration, the more that cost. And a clerk, if you are doing a smaller project, you may not have them full-time, but then they'd be working half-time over a longer period of time. Generally, you'd spend more money. So condensing the schedule might actually be helpful. At this point, the cost estimator, I think, is recommending a cost based on the size of the project and the duration, and those seem pretty, reasonable numbers. I mean, they all look big when you look at them in isolation, but I think these are, reasonable numbers for what we see in the industry, given the effort that's involved. So, if that's of any help.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Yes, Christopher?
Yeah, I was wondering, with regard to the Emergency Operations Center, remember we went back and forth on that, wondering if you should go downtown or out in West B. And one of the reasons to put it in West B was, well, we're right near a railroad. Suppose there were a chlorine gas leak. And then where would you put the EOC? Then wouldn't it have been best to have the EOC down in West B? So I'm wondering what a plan B might be for an EOC if we did have a disaster involving the need to avoid staffing that particular slot that's now envisioned.
We would probably utilize the communication trailer out in conjunction with the West Brattleboro Fire Station.
Oh, great. Okay. One more, if I could.
Sure.
Yeah. I've been approached on the street by people saying, hey, look, you really ought to do this in chunks rather than all at once. And I just heard, Bob saying that there might be efficiencies. And I wonder if you could articulate a little more what the rationale is for doing this all at once rather than in 3 different projects. I think it would be helpful for everyone to hear that.
Well, I think there are, Bob indicated one of the reasons that you do it together is because there are some reduction in costs. You're going to go out to bid once for your final design. You're going to go out to bid once, and bidding a project is an expensive process. There might be some, I would assume there'll be some savings with regard to a bigger project. You'll get a better competition with regard to the construction and engineering. One of the things that makes this project easier is if it's done together, is it does allow us with some of the timing, how we've proposed that there would be some savings would be with the fact that by doing the police or the 2 fire stations, kind of having how we schedule those would enable all of our trucks and our personnel to continue and to stay indoors, and because currently there's only one place you can put a ladder truck, and that's getting worked on, etc. You need another place. So if you have West B addition done, you can then move your ladder truck out there. One of the costs that isn't in here because of doing all 3 are costs associated with maintaining services. If we were, so for instance, if you weren't going to do a West Brattleboro and you were only going to do the central, you were to demolish the whole thing, one of the costs that you'd be adding in here is renting space and for buildings or temporary housing for your equipment as well as for your staff, because again, it's a 24/7. But all of these are 24/7 operations, and so you can't. It's not like some projects where you can say, "Well, we'll shut down tomorrow for a period of time." There is no one else to do dispatch. So those are some of the main reasons for that.
Okay. Thanks
Those are what
very
we
much.
feel are important.
Yep. Appreciate it.
All set? Next, schematics.
Schematics, if you start with the police, one of the things I just want to correct, this schematic on the far left says no basement in expansion. That's not true. There is a basement in the expansion, and the dollars are reflected in the budget. Basically, little if nothing has changed with regard to the schematic of the police station from what folks saw several meetings ago. The next then is the central. The only real change in central is on the, what would be the 2.5 floor. That has been extended out to the full length of that addition. At one point, it came, the second floor of the addition didn't go all the way out, didn't follow the full line. And so now it does. It was about 480 square feet that was added by doing that, and that was something we did. One of the changes that was made when the EOC moved to Central, we decided to utilize that entire space so that you weren't losing as much space from having the EOC there. And other than that, there were no real changes in Central. The change in West Brattleboro is that the addition of the EOC has been removed. You may recall that with that EOC, there was parking behind it, and at this more parking than what we have, because you had parking for your EOC. And what you see now is a removal of that. The parking's then been moved to the, what is that, north side of the building, and there's just been a number of spaces, 5 or 6, however many is shown there. And so that's the change there. Other than that, there is no change.
Any questions on the schematics?
I have one.
Sure.
Can you show me where the EOC is going to be in Central, at the Central Fire Station? Is that like first floor or what?
It would be on the 2.5 floor, and you can see it says it there, EOC with dispatch.
Oh, I see. Okay. With ventilation and heat and its own
Yes.
generator and self-sustaining.
It would be on the same generators for the building.
Okay.
That was in fact one of the areas where there was cost
Correct.
savings. The size of the generators was questioned during the meetings that the chair and I had with the contractor, and actually the size of the generators were brought down.
Oh.
I think particularly in West Brattleboro.
Oh, I see. So West B's generator is going to be smaller. Central is
About the
unchanged?
same.
Okay. Thank you.
Bob, I do have a question. There had been initially a design that showed a through driveway and road to the Academy parking lot. That's been removed now?
Yeah, that's correct. If you look at, there's a revised site plan in this packet, and it shows that for West Brattleboro, and it shows that parking stopping just as a dead-end loop so that there's no connection.
Great.
Yeah.
Seems prudent.
Other questions? All right. Dora?
Well, going back to the site plan for the police station, are we removing pavement from the corner of the building? I'm looking that there's plantings over here and a walkway, and I'm looking at walkways in the front.
We would be, yeah, you're talking like here.
I'm talking right here.
Yeah, there'd be some removal of paving that's there now. We'd put in a better sidewalk, and so that the sidewalk would go around the building towards the library. It would it would also be ADA accessible, so people park in the back. They'd be able to go to the library through that way, or they'd be able to walk around the building if they wanted to go in the front, just another walkway. Some people park on that side, and then it gives them, they walk kind of on the grass up here. And in fact, we pave that at this point, and this would just make it an actual walkway.
Yeah, well, it needs to be a walkway.
Yeah.
So, again, in the front, you know the place, that there, it's triangulated where it comes from where the library is to the front walk.
Mm-hmm.
And it kind of goes up like this.
Mm-hmm.
If we're going to be doing stuff, we might as well put a cut through so that, because people are walking there anyway, and it makes sense to,
Like here, you mean?
like here, in the front.
Oh, from here like this?
Yeah, because you know how it cuts at an angle,
Yeah.
at a sharp
Yeah.
angle.
That wouldn't be a problem. I can't tell from here where the elevation is on that, so, but I don't think it's a big deal either way.
And the only other question I have about that,
Can I ask, Dora, do you mean from the east side of the,
I mean from the library side.
right, from the
From-
east side of the parking at the police station down to the upper entrance at the library there?
No.
That's not what you're talking about?
She's talking
No, I'm
from the
talking-
sidewalk, the main sidewalk going into the building
All right.
and make a diagonal,
And
right?
make a diagonal so that it's going, because people are going to be walking from over there and going through and cutting down to the stairs. I mean, it's just a simple. And the only other comment I have is, when we looked at the drawing, and I know that that was a rough drawing and that's not the final design. It was, you know, pretty stark and not very aesthetically pleasing. And, you know, I'm looking at the plans and I'm seeing that there's a carport there and that's what you're going to see from the front. And I'm concerned about the aesthetics of that because a carport is, you know, can be very simple.
I think what we would need to do there, because, I mean, one of the goals is, and I think a very important goal, is to maintain the historic view from Main Street up to the Municipal Center. So that is, somehow or another, that's going to have to be able to occur. It's going to have to be able to occur anyway, because this is a historic, this is a historic building, so we would have to do a section 106, so, wouldn't we?
Only if you have federal money.
Oh, okay, well, hopefully we could.
That'd be great.
So we should be prepared to. So that would be one of the things we'd look at, and that actually is, yeah. The
Well,
worst case would be,
I'm not so sure. When you're at the bottom of the municipal center looking up, I don't know, I don't see the elevation of that structure there, but that's got to be, to pick that up.
it'll be kind of hard because of how the library comes over, but it's so hard to say at this
Yeah.
phase.
But it would be pretty easy to screen it out if it's a,
That's right.
because it's a one-story shed roof kind of structure next to the, you know, this massive building. So even if you could see it from Main Street, I think you could mitigate that pretty
You
easily.
could mitigate that
Yeah.
pretty easily, right? Yeah, I agree.
I'm really pleased to see, you know, that you're proposing sitting walls, you know, where people can just hang out, because it makes it more inviting and much more, it just helps Main Street be more central. It puts the town more as a central feeling place. I think that little aesthetic bit is going to be great. For what it's worth.
Anyone else? Ken? No? You're good. Okay.
What I would ask is that there not be any action taken at this meeting. I would ask that on the Tuesday meeting, on the 18th of September, that the board warn a special representative town meeting. My request would be that you warn it for October 20th, and that there be 2 public meetings prior to that. One, and I'm just throwing out dates, September 27th, one October 10th, to So that way it gets, actually, I was thinking, because this way it gets it before the November holidays. And that part of the October 20th, it's a Saturday. There is one other issue with a special representative town meeting that we would take up, and that would be the proposed charter change for the assessor's office that the board held a public hearing on some time ago. That is a standing voice vote. This is a ballot article because it's for money. Ballots, articles, polls open at 10 a.m. And so if you had an evening meeting, you would have people, you could do an evening meeting and have the standing voice vote and the discussion for the police fire, but the next day, starting at 10, the poll is when the polls would open for the bond vote. So if you had it on a non-Saturday, that's how it would look. So say you had it on a Thursday, or a special representative town meeting, there would be the discussion of the project. There would then be discussion and standing voice vote of the proposed charter change. And then the next day, starting at 10, we would probably have it set up here. We've done that before, where people come in the municipal center into the town clerk's office and vote. And again, this is representative town meeting, special representative town meeting. Or you would have it on a Saturday, and you would do the standing voice. That would start it, and you'd start it probably around 9 o'clock. You'd have the discussion. You'd have the assessors, and then polls would open at 10. And polls, the charter has been amended so that polls close within 1 hour.
30 minutes.
30 minutes after the close of the meeting. But it has not been changed, so the polls always are still opening at 10 a.m. So that would be, that would be a question for the board. What the board would have in front of it on Tuesday, the 18th, would be what the ballot question would be for this, which would be a bond question to finance an amount up to, or not to exceed, and then the charter change.
Discussion on that? David?
Dora, can go first.
Well, I mean, I thought we were discussing financials today, so I'm wondering why we're already talking about doing a warning for a representative town meeting. That we were talking about financing.
About how to finance,
Yeah.
or, yeah, I mean, it's up to the board. This would be my recommendation, because even if there's a discussion about a 1% sales tax or some other financing, the chances are you would still be bonding for that amount and paying back with a certain amount.
Yeah.
So I'm proposing dates. It's up to the board.
We're going to have to bond the whole amount, and the 1% question, that's certainly up to us whether we would want to do that at this special town meeting, or wait until March and do it then. We're not, if approved, you wouldn't be going to bond until around May,
Right, May?
Yes.
and if we waited to do the 1% discussion and hopefully passage in March, then that would start July 1. I recall when we did the rooms and meals tax, we had a special meeting late in I think in November, October, somewhere around in there. And by the time that the state got it started, we only received one check for the last quarter of, I think it might have been 2006 was my first year on the board, so I can recall that happened in 2006. So that's something that we can talk about. Do we want to do that at this meeting, or do we want to just wait until March to have that as a article question?
That is the next topic. Let's talk about I just want to finish talking about the dates first, if that's okay. Did you have more that you wanted to address, Dora?
Well, the only thing I was going to say is that I think we still have to have the discussion about financing, even if we're bonding for the whole amount, because whether, people's vote on a bond is going to be dependent on whether or not they think that there's going to be other kinds of financing associated with this. And so people are going to want to know that they're not just going to vote for a bond for, this high amount unless they think that there's might be some other money coming in.
So, in terms of timing, what were the dates again? You said September 27th and October...
September 27th, October 10th as public meetings, and then the representative town meeting, special representative town meeting, October 20th.
My only, I think that fits well with budget season because we're going to be starting up end of October, beginning of November with next year's budget. I'm a little concerned about running this at the same time that the town plan is being presented to us. We ran into that last year when there was a possibility that the town plan was going to be completed, and we wanted to try to get our work on the town plan done before budget season. So when do we anticipate the town plan
The town
coming to us?
plan, the Planning Commission just approved this, forwarding the town plan to the Select Board, and there's a minimum of a 30-day warning period. So you could start looking at the town plan. You haven't gotten it yet. You won't get it until your October 2nd meeting from them. You have a 30-day. Because I was talking with Rod about this today, there's like a 30-day warning on, and then you have to have 2 hearings on it.
So it's going to be happening at the same time, essentially.
Same time or right after.
All right.
I mean, that's kind of the problem with the town plan coming at this point, is that you're going to be running it into November.
At the same time as this, and then into November.
Yeah, when you get into the holiday season. That's...
I think that the town plan process has had a fairly good vetting process. I don't think that there'll be a whole lot of confusion with the town plan and the police fire facility.
Well, I've got no problem with the time frames that you've suggested. I question whether a town meeting discussion of the police fire facility and the financing for that facility and the charter changes can all be completed in a nighttime meeting. So unfortunately, it might be better to warn a daytime meeting with the ballot question to happen the following Monday. Can it work that way?
No.
If it can't work that way, how are we going to have the voting?
If we have a meeting on Saturday, the polls open on Saturday. The polls open at 10 o'clock.
Well, we have to have a town meeting where the police fire is discussed at a representative town meeting
That's
before
right.
before the ballots open.
What you would do is you could start your meeting earlier so that you have minimally 2 hours. People can always, it has happened in the past where people have said, don't vote yet. You know, you can't prevent somebody from, if they say, I know what I'm going to vote for, it doesn't matter, I'm going to vote anyway.
I thought that you can't have discussion on an item that's where the ballots are open.
No, that's changed. That's changed now. You don't have to, the only reason we still, that statute's changed, and the only reason we still take up ballot questions prior to 10 o'clock is so that we can kind of push the conversation prior. Otherwise, if you had a ballot, if the town went second, we wouldn't have ever discussed anything by the time you get to it before the polls open. So we continue to work under that, but we wouldn't have to. You can discuss items after polls have opened now.
The, uh, the
That's
assessor's
right.
question is, I think that's going to be rather just short and,
Thought that the first time.
hmm?
We may have thought that the first.
Yeah, that's right. Dora?
So are we talking about not having a discussion about the financing as a select board and just bringing it to representative town meeting? Is that what we're talking about?
I don't think
No,
that's what I heard.
we're, obviously, the next item up here that we're going to talk about is the 1%, to find out if there's consensus to go forward with that. But at the end of the day, even if there's no consensus, I would hope that the board would still take the project through to town meeting. So that's, I mean, I know I'm a big supporter of it, but
Part of the other financing options that might be out there, like grants or things like that, the issue with kind of talking about those now is you can't apply for something unless you have the project. So you have to have that approval beforehand. So when you talk about financing, I don't know if you're talking about just the 1%, if you're talking in general. I'm assuming you're talking in general about financing.
Well, I'm talking in general, and I understand that the whole grant, I understand that the whole grant thing is sort of just a what if.
Right.
I think knowing what the possibilities are, at least, is important, because people need to know that there is X, Y, and Z possibility as additional financing that wouldn't necessarily fall burden on the property tax.
There is, with the idea of grants, and if that's what we're looking at, just talking about grants, there aren't a lot. There aren't a lot now. Homeland Security doesn't have as many. When you have your EOC as part of an entity, you lose, some ability to go for most EOC grants are for freestanding. There are not a lot of, we've looked at USDA, those aren't particularly good for us. They usually, you still have better financing through bonding. If you look at, there's always a possibility, there's always possibility you may have, some other funding source come in over the, during this period of time, but, you may be able to find some historic, monies for historic buildings, renovations. Typically, municipalities are not included in those. Those tend to be more buildings owned by privately owned historic buildings.
Oh, the facilities grant you're talking about?
Yeah, facility grants are some of the other ones. You get into also some of the benefits of historic buildings tend to be in tax credits, which aren't really applicable. So you don't have a lot of options. What you do have is the ability to say, if something comes, to say, we've got this, it's been approved, and go after it.
Ken had his hand up first. Ken?
I find it unlikely that we're going to get more than 2 minutes into town meeting without someone raising their hand and asking how we're paying for it. So I don't think that, I appreciate the idea of supporting the project as independent from how we're paying for it. I just don't think we're going to get very far into a meeting without someone asking. And so I was kind of clear, and now I'm more confused because I understand the concept of town meeting has to give it a thumbs up in order to apply for grants, but which was the start of what you said, but where you just ended up, I thought, was that there aren't that many grants to apply for.
There aren't particularly a lot of, at one point after 9/11 and 11 years ago, there were more facility grants available. Those have basically dried up. That is not where the push is with the federal government at this point. And as I said, so you go to some of your others like the USDA, which is a loan grant program typically doesn't benefit us because the financing rates are usually, bond financing rates are usually better than what we can get through the USDA. I guess the question that I mean, there are a couple of things with regard to, I think that if you want a sure thing of what to fund it with, other than bonding it and attaching it to property taxes in that way, would be, you know, what you have control over approving or trying to get approved, which is a 1% sales tax. The issue with the 1% sales tax is if you do that at the same meeting, that's a standing voice vote. So you would have the vote on the 1% sales tax. You could do that at the same meeting. You have the standing voice vote on the 1% sales tax, and then you have your bond. You'd have your bond Australian ballot. So the reason you can, the only reason I would suggest that the 1% sales tax goes on to the regular representative town meeting, and again, this is totally a decision of the board, is because then people know that it's actually, the project's been approved, and that money is going to be going for that project. That's my reasoning, because then people actually know this is it. Otherwise, what happens is you get into this chicken and egg. Well, we
You
need
could-
to do
yeah,
this
sure.
to do this, but
Right,
then we
that's
need to
what
do
I was
this to do this.
You could
And
actually
so
have, you could
that's
have
the that's the
sales
reason.
tax pass and the bond vote fail.
That's the reason I would recommend separating.
Vice versa.
My
Yeah,
reason.
right. David?
I think that my position about the sales tax was clear at the last meeting. I think that, but I need to articulate it a little bit more. I think that, and I think I was misquoted in the paper last week, without an alternate source of funding, the tax increase to build the police fire would be astronomical. I don't think the cost of the facility is astronomical at $14.1 or $14.6 million, but I think the tax increase will be way too high unless there's an alternate source of funding. And no matter how much I support the police fire reconstruction proposal, it's hard for me to support it without an alternate source of funding. So for me, having the alternate source of funding, and I don't know that I want to be thought of as saying I think the 1% sales tax is a good thing, because I think that's the lesser of bad alternatives. Either we're going to pay for it all from the property tax, we're going to pay for it partially from the property tax and partially from sales tax. I think those two things have to be linked together when this project is presented to the representative town meeting members. I don't know how we get there procedurally, and I'm concerned about our ability to have a meeting warning ready for next Tuesday that will properly address procedurally a way to link those things together. Because I've been wondering about this. How do we go about? Do we have a vote saying, do you support it with the 1% sales tax or without?
No,
But
because
that's what I want
not
to see.
you. How the voting is done by representative town meeting is established in the charter, and the 1% sales tax is a standing voice vote.
That's right.
So I don't think you can. I mean,
Well, for me, I'm not sure I support building the project without
you
a sales tax.
would. What you could do is say, take up the vote, take up the 1% sales tax. That's a standing voice vote. You know the result of that. And people can vote
Either
at
way.
any time after the project. So I think what you're saying, to link them, you would link them verbally. I don't think you can necessarily link them in a ballot question.
But that's just my view.
Right.
I mean, I don't know.
Right.
that
Right,
other-
but you
anybody else
could, but I
agrees.
think what you're saying is, though, would be, I think to get to your end, you would just need to have both, you would have you would have two questions and then a ballot question. You would have the assessors, a sales tax, and then a ballot question.
I have to tell you, I would suspect that going into town meeting on an issue like this with the two informational meetings, people on that issue are going to pretty much have their mind made up. The bigger question is going to be the sales tax question, the 1%. I think that that's going to be, and so even if you have the discussion about the police fire first, and then once the polls open, you can ask people not to vote, and more often than not, they don't. Maybe people on their own would want to wait, but I suspect that there's people who are going to want to vote for the facility regardless of whether the 1% sales tax passes or not. Now, I'm like you in the sense that the lesser of two evils is having that 1% assist us in paying for the debt service. I totally agree with you there. We don't have other options available to us. I mean, everybody always talks about, why not a gas tax? Why not a tax on soda? Why not a tax here? The legislature, in its infinite wisdom, has only given us the 1% rooms and meals and the 1% sales tax. We do the 1% rooms and meal now, at the present time. So if there needs to be a consensus here on the board whether there is support to go forward with a 1% sales tax. Because if there isn't consensus on the board to go forward with it, then you're left sitting with, are we going to go forward with the police fire station? And we know that paying for the police fire station at that point would be fully borne by the taxpayers of Brattleboro. Because the reality is there's no other funding out there. You may find some nickels and dimes, but the funding is going to come from the taxpayers. And so you either have to get comfortable with saying, yeah, I support the 1% because of this, it's going to go for that project. And if we can't get consensus here on the board, then I'm not sure, but I would hope that we would have consensus to go forward with the project, at least to get it to town meeting and let town meeting members make that decision. Bob?
Thank you. I'm sort of listening to this and wrestling with this from the standpoint of several of the business communities or organizations that I sit on, and I think you've sort of hit the catch-22. I think there's going to be a fair amount of opposition to the 1% sales tax from the business community in town, and that debate is appropriate to have and decide where that falls. So my concern was linking the two projects together. It's been, what, 10 years since the last police fire issue came up to the voters, and if we tie the two of them together in a way where you got to have both to win, this may go down where otherwise we might have gotten support if they weren't linked. And you're already wrestling with that issue, and I wish you luck with it because I think it's a tough one. But I just wanted to be clear that there's already sort of discussion in the business community of saying that as you know, as a river town, adding 1% sales tax will have a ripple effect through the business community, ultimately have an effect on our brand list in terms of whether we can keep businesses successful in this town. And there is statistical data that links the difference in sales tax to sales. We already know we have a lot of bleed on the other side of the river. So it's a tough question, and there's no easy answer. So I appreciate it bringing it up, but whether they're linked together, it's a real quandary.
Because I don't see that linking them together as a question because there's no way to, I don't see there's a way to link them together by having one ballot question with the two on it. And so if they're linked together in people's minds. and they'll be linked together in people's minds, whether or not they're one question or two questions.
You know, and, you know, the debate on the 1% sales tax, I expect the business community to jump up and down. We had the restaurants come in and jump up and down. Guess what? We've had new restaurants open up. And so the reality is, for me as a select board member, I can't just listen to the vocal minority. So I'm looking at the whole picture and the information that we had at our last select board meeting, what the impact would be with and without the 1% sales tax on Brattleboro homeowners. Says, you know what? I think that we can do this. Other towns in our state are doing it successfully. You're always going to get the same argument about the river. So I expect all that stuff to come forward. And so that will be a good debate to have. And who wins out in the end?
Just to follow up, though,
Okay.
it would be great if, as David said, you could, as leaders of the community, when that question comes up, to say whether you can make the decision, you know, we support this project, irrespective of that, we prefer this, because that is, in effect, I think, going to be a hard choice for everybody, and you folks as well. Yeah.
Dora?
So it's going to be no surprise to anyone that I don't support a 1% sales tax. It's not just the business community. I haven't been able to go anywhere in the last week without having multiple people come up to me and talk about the ridiculousness of raising the 1% sales tax. So, and there's a lot of opposition to it. So, you know, it's not just the business community. It is coming from the business community, but it's a lot of other people too. I do think that there will be a lot of opposition to it. I don't think I think whether you link it or not, it's going to be inextricably linked. I think that, you know, in my personal view about the project, and I'm perfectly willing to support it, to bring it to representative town meeting, but I think it's too high a cost for homeowners, and it's not about whether or not it's needed. It's too high a cost at this point, and long before this came up, I have had multiple people say to me, if taxes go up anymore, I am going to have to sell my house because I'm not going to be able to afford to live here anymore. And I don't want people feeling that. I personally have been wrestling with the idea of buying a house or not buying a house. This is making me decide not to buy a house. So, I think that taxes going up that high is too high a price to pay. Unless we can figure out other ways of financing it.
Well, that probably isn't going to happen unless we find some anonymous donor who says we're going to bequeath, $10 million to the town for this facility. And I would tell you that we did a $53 million high school. We have renovated Academy School. We have renovated Green Street School. Every school in the community to the tune of about, I think, $85 or $90 million. We're not even the interest payment on that. And so from the standpoint of looking at the school and the municipality, it is time that they started getting treated equally, because they never have been treated equally in terms of financing. When I go to town meeting, everything for the school, I mean, we could do this, the school budget in 5 minutes, and that's usually probably what it takes. The municipal budget gets scrutinized harder than the school side, and there's an equity problem that I have with that. It's still coming out of my pocket, tax dollars that come out of my pocket. And the school side, which has had multi-million-dollar projects done, and here the municipality hasn't had a project done other than the sewer project, which is a totally different fund. And here we are going forward, and we have somebody saying it's too expensive. Now, the board has gone through it, and I can tell you, David going through that budget and myself going through it, there was some good discussions there. And this project right here is down to where, you know, it's an acceptable number. It really is an acceptable number. We're doing 3 facilities. We're not doing 1 facility. We're doing 3 facilities. So from that standpoint, and I would disagree with you in the sense that people are coming up. They might be telling you, but I'm around and I'm talking to people. And I'm asking people how they feel about it. And how do you feel about the facility? How do you feel about the 1% sales tax? I'm in the supermarket. I talked to people in there yesterday. And, you know, they want to know more about it. They understand why we would be doing it. So that will be a good discussion. And as under redundant, I expect all the businesses to go, or not all of them, because it has a different effect on some businesses. It will have a greater effect on some businesses than it does to others. You know, when people are coming into Brattleboro, and I always say this, and I'm going to say it again, nobody in this room and nobody that I ever talk to bases where they're going based upon the sales taxes that they're going to pay in any state or wherever they're going on vacation. They're not going, I'm not going to go to that state because the rooms and meals tax is 9%. I'm not going there. People go where they're going to go, and they don't even think about the taxes. And I haven't had, no one's been able to say, yeah, I don't go to Maine anymore because the sales tax is too high. In fact, when people come into Vermont, they go, oh, no sales tax on clothing. So that's one of the things that the legislature did away with. That's a good thing. Ken?
Here's where this gets confusing. I mean, and I don't disagree with some of what Doris said. The difficulty is that I don't see how you can assert right now that you are for the project, but not for the increase in property taxes. Because the vote on its own, when we don't link them, and I think it has to be really clear with people. We bring something to representative town meeting and you have a ballot question. You can't presuppose that we're going to pass something later on. The vote that is in front of people to approve the project is a vote for increased property taxes. And I think it's confusing to say I'm for the project, but I'm not for the taxes, because I think we need to be as clear as possible that until something else comes along, which, as we've already talked about extensively this meeting, is not a given. You know, they could vote for the project and not vote for the sales tax. And my assumption is we would start with the project, we wouldn't start with the sales tax. I mean, I know we could, but that wouldn't make a ton of sense procedurally. And so I think it needs to be crystal clear to people that the vote in front of them to vote for the project, to support the project, barring any other option, the one that's in front of people is for property taxes to go up. I think that you can, I think it's, I understand what Bob's saying and what we've been saying about not linking them, but as Barb said, they're going to be linked in people's minds, and I think we have to take it step by step. And so this idea of, you can't say at the same time that you support the project but you don't support the tax increase, because the vote on the table in front of people is for the tax increase. And I think it's confusing to people to say both of those things at the same time. I think it's okay to say, I don't support the project because I don't support the tax increase.
David?
I'd like to make sure I understand something about the numbers, which I did not fully grasp after the last meeting. What is the current, John, what is the current residential real estate tax rate for the town? It's like $1.10, $1.20, $1.30?
$1.10 is my recollection.
$1.10. And the business real estate tax for the municipality?
It's lower than
Not a lot lower, though. It's in that range.
that. Yes.
What is the rate increase going to be for this $14.1 million project funded solely by property taxes? And I'm not asking percentage, I'm asking cent
10.5 cents.
10.5 cents. So we're talking essentially a 9% tax increase, 10 cents per 100.
Correct.
10 cents per 100, it's going to go up. I can say at this point that I can't support the project if it's funded solely with property taxes. I can say that now. And I don't know how other board members feel, but I think that the funding mechanism has to be presented to the voters at the same time, because I respect that Dora's heard a lot of different views. I respect that you've heard a lot of different views. I expect all of us have. The views that I've heard consistently and without exception are that you can't build a thing solely with property taxes. Too big a tax increase for property owners in the town. That's what I've heard consistently. I've had some people say to me, business owners, that they're opposed to the sales tax, but I haven't had anybody come up to me and say, yes, we should build this thing solely based upon levying higher property taxes.
Ken?
And that's where this gets dangerous.
Right.
And so that's what I'm still struggling with, because I think it's really dangerous to vote on a bond issue in the hopes that something else is going to pass. And so to vote for the bond issue is to vote for the property tax increase.
Unless you do the 1%, the vote on the 1%.
Which would be a standing vote, though.
Yes, so you know what the result is immediately.
You know what the result is going to be at town meeting immediately.
Then you're agreeing with David and saying these votes should be at the same meeting.
And you ask people then, if it's important enough to somebody not to have this paid for solely by property taxes, then that person waits and doesn't vote on the ballot until after we see if the 1% passes.
After we see. Tell me the order again, because that's what I'm missing. So
That's-
first, which would
Polls
happen?
open at 9.
Polls open. When you
Right.
were at town meeting, polls open at 10 o'clock,
Okay.
okay? And so the polls are open, and we've been discussing for an hour and a half, the police fire
6 hours,
facility.
come on.
Okay?
So for 15 minutes we talked about it. Keep going.
Okay, so now the next item up is the 1% sales tax. No one's gone to vote yet, or they're going to wait to vote on the ballot initiative until the standing vote is taken on the 1%.
So the sales tax
Sales
vote would
tax.
happen before people vote on the project.
That's correct.
It could.
It could happen.
You have the right to vote
Yes.
for or against, and if you don't care about the funding mechanism, then you vote for or against the
Right.
project
If
right
you're
away.
not for the project, no matter what, you're going to vote no, and you could vote at 10 o'clock.
I'm just nervous about someone voting thinking that the sales tax piece is going to
That-
pass.
I think
It's
that will be
representative-
perfectly
Clear about that.
clear. There
Representative
won't-
town meeting,
Town
they're
meeting will be perfectly, everybody
They're
will
fine.
be perfectly clear about that. We'll make sure that in the informational meetings, that if that's what we want to happen, and it sounds to me like that's where we're leaning now, is having that 1% discussion on the 20th, then
Can you put on there the question of, voting? I'm not
You-
suggesting language because I'm the last person who should be doing that, but I'm voting in favor of this bond, which will result in this property tax
We don't
increase.
know what
No.
that property tax increase would be.
we don't.
It
that's
could
right.
be more or less depending on the grand list, so you can't make those kind of promises. Representative, we have to have a little more respect for the members, because reality is, they get it, and they're going to get it. This is being talked about. They're going to talk about it. If you want to link those two together and you want to tell somebody, a member, that they can't go vote because you want to have this other vote first, you are going to make people mad. Just the same way as if you tried to say you can't link them. They'll make up their own minds, particularly they'll make up their own minds, and they'll decide how they're going to vote, and they'll decide if they're going to wait or if they're going to. have a great respect for
I
the
just want
body.
everyone to have as much, it's not a lack of respect, it's just making sure that we're providing as much information as we can possibly provide, so people are making the most informed decisions.
I guess Ken's question, restated another way, is can the bond article provide that the town meeting members approve the bond subject to a 1% sales tax to help defray the expenses? And I don't think
I
that
don't
we can do
believe
that
it can.
procedurally.
No, I don't believe it can.
And I don't think it's,
we
I
can.
don't think it's
That's
fair,
the
I don't think
question.
it's fair to the project, first and
No,
foremost.
it's not a
Just
good idea.
because we want it linked, I
I'm just
think that
asking.
you,
I
yeah,
wasn't
but
asking.
I think that
Well,
from,
but I'm inquiring because you could also have another alternate bond question, which says that you're in favor of the bond whether or not there's a sales tax from the
But
solar
then you
property
can't,
taxes.
you would end up with two bond votes, and they could
understand.
both vote, they could both, you wouldn't want them both to win.
But there's no way to know
And-
really about the linkage in voters' minds
You don't know
without
until they
posing up
vote.
alternatives.
Until,
That's right.
well, you do, though. When they vote, you'll know.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure I agree.
Dora, did you have your hand up?
Well, I was just going to say that y- you're forgetting about a pretty large subset of people who may either be against both, or, you know, I mean, like, there's just so many variables in that to, you know, that it makes it difficult to try to have some sort of question that would involve both of them.
How do I vote against everything?
Christopher, you've been,
I've been listening. So are we, hey, remember what Lincoln said about better to be thought a fool and remain silent than open your mouth and remove all doubt? Yeah.
Now you're just doing name calling.
I think it's a layup that we vote, ask people to vote on the 1% sales tax as the most, because it's the most practical thing to do. And then, with that passed, then we can ask people if they want to build the fire and police facilities. I have other things to say, but some of it's repetitive from the last meeting. One is that I think we have to avoid delay. I think that we have to afford this. It's not a matter of not being able to afford it. We have two examples in town of two major projects for which the can was kicked down the road for years and years. And one was the high school, and ended up costing $55 million to fix it up. If there had been money spent sooner on fixes here, there, and here, there, and then here and there again, for example, with ventilation, we may not have had to spend that much money. And when we did spend it later, it cost more. Same with the water treatment plant. That went for years and years without major work. And look what it's costing now, and it's painfully expensive to everyone who pays pays the sewer tax. And we know, Barb has made it clear that if we do not move forward on this, we're still going to have to budget increases for maintenance on those properties because they need attention now. And that kind of work cannot be put off. So I think that the advice that we've been given from long-studied process on this issue indicates that we need to move forward. And the thing that I would repeat from last time is that I don't believe that there's evidence that the current 1% tax that's in place on rooms and meals has actually discouraged business. We have indeed seen growth in businesses, with new businesses and business expansions. So the argument about people coming to town and shopping less, I think does not cut any ice. So that's really what I have to say on those items.
Dora?
Well, I do want to say one thing about the rooms and meals tax, and that is that New Hampshire has a 10% rooms and meals tax, and so there is no difference. There is no effect. So even if people were thinking about that, and we know that when people are consuming alcohol, they're not thinking about these things. But even if they were thinking about that, there's no competition.
And I guess I would say that with a lot of the businesses that we have in our town, we are, as David has duly noted on multiple occasions, we're the hub. We're the epicenter for really Wyndham County. I mean, people come to Brattleboro. So from that standpoint, a lot of people come to Vermont at 6%. I mean, they could easily get off exit 3 and just all go to New Hampshire coming up 91. They don't seem to do that. They seem to like what we have here. So I look forward to that debate. I'm sure it's going to be rather spirited. And I won't take it personal, and I hope that the opposition doesn't take it personal. What I guess I need to know here from where we're sitting right now, is there a consensus to move forward with the 1%?
To present it.
To present
To
it
present it?
on a
That's
warning.
very
To
different
present it
thing.
on a warning.
Yes.
Yeah.
How do you want to ascertain
I'm
that?
just,
It's just a consensus,
just
so
a
that we know
consensus.
the vote will be next Tuesday.
Tuesday.
On
I would
when
like
you
to-
talk about the warning.
Say again that I hate that we have no other options. And that's what I'm hearing.
I should have run for the Senate.
Next time.
I have so many comments right now. Go ahead.
There you go.
We do, don't do the project, that's what.
So,
Right.
Okay, we are, I think we are set with this, and we're actually a little bit longer
Thank you.
than we wanted to be, but good discussion. Thank you, board members. Thank you.
so did you get your indication?
Yes, I did.
The next is the social media policy. The board received in their packets the compilation of changes that were proposed.
Make the chief come back. Because they use Facebook. It would be great to actually hear from departments who are using it. That he left. Okay, go ahead. No, that's okay.
Ask him to come back?
That's okay.
So I don't know, David presented some suggestions and some questions. There was also, a question has gone out to the, through the VLCT with regard to social media and other towns. Don't have anything back on that yet.
Ken?
So, the other thing that I learned that I don't have anything with in front of me is that Jerry Goldberg has a system that there is the possibility with a lot of ease that things like Facebook can be archived quite easily. That he knows of this whole easy to use computer program that archives on a regular basis what's happening on Facebook. And so I think, because I think that is a piece that we want to put a
That's
check mark
interesting.
next to, that it can be archived for public information purposes,
That would
And so that's not as
be
much of a
great to follow
concern
up with him. He's not
as it was.
here this week.
I'm told Jerry has it.
Okay, cool. Thank
I'll
you.
have to ask him.
David? Or
Dora.
Dora?
You go ahead.
Either or.
Well, I put these comments together because as I went through the draft policy, I had notes on the side and I figured it was easier to distribute them this way. And I think it really boils down just to 3 or 4 or 5 questions. The first one is, what's the nature of the interaction between the town and the public and the town using social media? And the way this policy is written, it's anticipated that the public will submit comments for prior review before they're posted. That's the way I read this policy,
That's not how it was intended, actually.
but that's
It would
what's
be-
written here.
Where do you, when you say that,
Well, I mean, it's right there in the definitions. It says a comment is something submitted by a member of the public to the town for posting on the town's social media website.
that doesn't mean it would be reviewed. It's just a comment that's posted on it. It doesn't mean it would be pre-reviewed.
Well, I think that the other review provisions in the policy certainly contemplate prior review, because we're reviewing content. That's what's being suggested here.
but not prior to posting.
I think I disagree.
You
I
gotta
think
tell me where, because I
Well, but
I
that's
read
what it
this and
says
I
right
didn't
here.
see that.
Submitted to the town for posting. So it's not going directly to the website. It's going to the town for posting.
Are there other places too?
Where's
That's not how I read that sentence.
What was it?
Right here.
So I think you could clean up the language, but that's certainly not the intent of the policy. That would actually defeat the purpose of the policy. It
Well,
would
I'm
be
not-
the complete contradiction.
I don't know if you could say that whether it's the intent of the policy or not, as it was drafted by this person. I mean, it may not be your intent, but the way I read this policy as a whole, it looks to me like the suggestion is that data is being submitted to town officials for review and posting. That's the way I read this as an entirety. May not be what you intended.
I don't
But the
read
way
it
this-
that way.
Well,
So
that's the way I read it.
Again, that's why I want to see if you can point to other places in here where you read it that way. Because I think, yeah, that definition of comment can be cleaned up. So if there are other places, then we should clean it up, because I would challenge us to find someone using social media where someone is submitting a comment pending review before being posted. It's contrary to the whole idea behind the policy to give people access. And in fact, there's the whole section in here about not censoring comments, except if they're posted and are contrary to that list on pages 3 and 4.
Well, section 7, the first paragraph, says that the town manager, the social networking monitor, will oversee all content to ensure adherence to the policy.
Sure.
That the department heads will be responsible for the content and upkeep of any town social media sites. I don't think that any other inference can be drawn, but that the content is being submitted to the town, and then town officials are responsible for the content, that it's being presented through town officials for posting. I'm not saying that's the way it works. I'm saying that's the way the policy reads.
David, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing that reading at all. Someone overseeing the content means the content that's present on the website. I'm not seeing how you're reading that they would review the content before it's posted. You're inserting a timeline that I'm not seeing here. I agree, they oversee all the content that's on the page. That doesn't mean that and even approving the content, that means they're looking at the content and figuring it out. I'm not seeing where it's submitted to the town for review and then it's posted.
Well, it's submitted to the town for posting. That's what it says in the definition of comment.
Right.
It's submitted to the town for posting, and then the town has the responsibility to review the content. I don't see what other inference can be drawn. I hear that you view it differently. That's the way I read this policy.
That's not. I'm sorry. I'm also viewing it differently because that's not how social media works. Like that's.
I understand that, but then we have to make a decision about what how the town's responsibility is going to be implemented with respect to the content here. And maybe it's just a language thing. Maybe it's just a language thing. I read this to say information is presented to the town and then is posted. That's what it says.
Okay, but please don't say there's no other inference, because
I didn't say there wasn't any other. That's the only inference I can draw from the language. You read it differently. Fine.
Okay, that's fine. That's not what I was hearing at this end of the table. I don't see how it's even remotely possible, given social media, for people to submit comments, have the town review them before they're posted. I don't think that actually is possible.
Then this
So that
should-
needs to be
Then I
clarified.
agree. Then
So
language
that
needs to be cleaned up.
clarified.
Christopher
That's
first.
not how Facebook
You know,
even works.
we could clean this up very easily, I think, under section 3 where it says comment. And just on the second line there of that definition of comment, leave in the first 2 words to the, and delete the 5 words town for posting on the, so that it says that a comment means a statement or response submitted by a town official or member of the public to the town's social media website. Because that's the way it works with Facebook. where you make a comment, and my clear inference from this policy was that the department heads would be cleaning up stuff that shouldn't be there, like obscene comments or inappropriate personal insults and things like that. But that people could simply put stuff up subject to it being taken down if it's inappropriate. Barb, is that your impression? Yours?
That would be how I would see this happening.
Okay.
Is that what I'm hearing is that language needs to be cleaned up.
A little bit. So so when we get to the point where we're making changes to the verbiage, that's where I'd start, because that takes care of the issue, I think.
How does everybody feel about that? Obviously, okay.
Yes.
Dora?
I actually read it the way David read it, too. I still am concerned about the issue of boards and committees, because being able to do things on their own. They're political bodies, and one person should be able to post something for the board or committee, because I certainly wouldn't want Dick posting stuff on the Facebook for all 5 of us, because it would not necessarily be what I would say. And so I have concerns about the language in here, because it doesn't really say anything about boards and committees. And we know that there are some committees that have sites right now.
Do you want to take that? Do you want to state that boards, town boards or committees shall not have?
I either want to say that, or I want to have something in there that says whatever they put up has to have some sort of decision made by that board, and it goes through whatever staff member that is as opposed to the board or committee themselves. And I personally don't want boards or committees to do it at all, but I'm not sure that that's how everybody feels here. So I at least want some sort of thing restricting and making sure that one person on a board or committee isn't sort of running rogue and putting stuff up.
Can we pause right there? Town official means employees of the town, public officers, whether elected or appointed, and town volunteers.
Which would be a board or a committee.
Right. How is there not language here that applies this to boards and committees?
Right,
Because, but there's nothing in here that says that that there's nothing in here that stops one person from posting something.
Okay, you can keep going. I will find that part.
I think, in fact, section 12, the second paragraph, is incorrect. And I think that violates the open meeting law.
Section 12, what?
Second paragraph.
I thought the same thing.
Public boards and committees may utilize town social media for gathering public input and fostering public discussion relating to the role with which it has been charged by statute or the select board. I think that violates the open meeting law.
I do too.
It says you can conduct your business by social media. And I think that you can't do that.
No,
Ken?
that's okay. And again, maybe we can do clarifying language. That's completely not how I'm reading this. Again, the policy clearly states that the social media is not supposed to supplant an officially warned meeting. But Dora going out on the streets and gathering input is exactly the same as a public board using social media to gather input. You can't take a vote on it, but any of us going out there and gathering input, this is just another way of gathering input.
I disagree under the open meeting law. I think that this would allow serial discussion, and you could have a quorum of a board participating in a social media discussion or exchange of comments.
You can't exchange comments based on this policy.
I think that this clearly contemplates you could have 3 members of a 5-member board or committee, each posting their views on a social media site. That violates the open meeting law.
Yes, that would violate the open meeting law.
That's right.
That is not what this says.
I think it does.
Okay, so Using the examples in the primary that I gave, the idea behind it, and again, I think that we can clarify things, and I think that maybe there's more verbiage that needs to be added. But the idea is that the Brattleboro Police Department has an account. The Brattleboro Police Department posts something that says, or let's use a committee. The Town Arts Committee has an account. The Town Arts Committee posts on there, hey, what does everyone think of more public sidewalk art, which is one of their topics for their meetings. What's posted is from the Town Arts Committee. If then the individual members went on there and posted their own views, which it says in here you're not supposed to be doing, that's violating open meeting law. The Town Arts Committee putting a post out there soliciting public input does not violate open meeting law. It comes from the body. It doesn't, town social media are not individuals doing that. If it's individuals, that absolutely violates open meeting law. But the Town Arts Committee putting out there a question and gathering input, which helps inform their next meeting, doesn't supplant the meeting. You can't make a decision based on that public input, but it informs it. That's great. That adds access to people and doesn't violate open meeting law.
I
No,
disagree with your interpretation.
I don't disagree with what you're saying. The issue is, and I agree with David here, is that once you have 3 people, say I think that we should put more art up on the wall in the High Grove lot, okay? And there's a discussion that starts. And then you chime in because you were the overseer of it.
That's what you can't do under this policy.
But that's, here, by what this says right here, you're talking about public boards and committees may utilize town social media for gathering of public input, period. Okay? And fostering of public discussion related to the rule for which it has been charged by statute of the town select board.
Keep going.
Okay? Provided that the use is authorized in accordance with and conforms to this policy.
Correct.
Okay? So I think that David's issue is, I don't have a problem with gathering information. The problem
Which
is...
you can't do under this policy. You can't have a discussion under this policy. And if there is a discussion going on, that's why you have the moderator who goes in, who sweeps in and is reviewing the content to say, no, those are individuals having discussion that is supplanting a meeting. That is against open meeting law. That needs to be taken down.
As that
That's the
happened
whole
with-
point.
As that happened with us early on.
First off, I disagree with your use of the word supplanting. Supplementing also violates the open meeting law. I think any discussion of matters that are properly charged with board or committee, which doesn't occur in open meeting, violates the open meeting law. And I think that even the gathering of serial comments in this manner that a majority of the board is looking at violates the open meeting law. And I can't support that sort of a use of social media. I just can't support it.
May I ask,
Go ahead, Kristen.
let me ask Barb.
Till the law changes.
This is language provided by the Vermont League of Citizen Towns?
Basically, yes.
I've got to assume that this has been vetted by their council.
It's like we're discovering something for the first time, that they, in putting this policy together, didn't think that putting that down violated open meeting law. And I find that to be just, we must have remarkable talents that we're able to see that what was provided to us violates the open meeting law, but what the league has put forward to us doesn't. How does that make any sense?
I'm glad that you have such faith in the way in which they drafted the policy, but I don't take the policy that they prepared lock, stock, and barrel and agree that it conforms. I read the language and
Okay.
I don't agree it conforms.
I
Christopher
wonder
first.
if it might be a good idea to ask our council to look at this language and interpret, and give us an interpretation of the law.
Sure.
Dora?
Just one more more thing I wanted to say about the boards and committees issue, and the fact that it is a very fine line, because so many of the things that they are political bodies, and everything that they're dealing with is a political issue. So anything that they post is potentially a political issue. So if it's something, and unless there's unless there's a full board agreeing on everything that's being posted on Facebook, which I doubt there probably is, it's really hairy to think that a board or a committee would, be able to post things like that, because unless there's, we've got 3 boards that have statutory, statutory specifications as to what they are. The rest of them are just, but we've had issues that have come up over the years that have been extremely politically charged and have not necessarily been handled well by the board or committee itself. And when you start putting in social media into that mix as well, without there being some sort of without there being staff sort of looking at what's going on, and we're not just talking about a moderator. We're talking about whoever that staff person that is staffing that particular board or committee, and some of them have, less staff involvement than others because they're, not, and so the idea of a committee not necessarily being, closely monitored by staff, and then also having, a social media presence is, could be ripe with all kinds of issues for the town, not to mention how quickly it can get to an open meeting law violation. And yes, the moderator can go on there and stop that and clean it up, but it's happened already.
Because we
Ken?
have no policy.
Uh,
We didn't have a policy to address it. That's why we need a policy, so that, again, you've at least 4 times referred to these violations. I have no idea what you're referring to, so it becomes difficult to have this conversation, except that I will extrapolate out. That is, you are articulating perfectly the need for a policy. If it's happened in the past, then we have to do something to change it so that we can bring things into line.
I don't disagree that we need a policy. I've said all along we need a policy. I'm okay with most of the policy. I just think that it needs clarifying language related to boards and committees.
A board member has made a suggestion that we turn this over to council for his review. Is there support for that?
Yes. I think it's the wise thing to do. Because it's either got problems with the open meeting law or it doesn't. And I think that we just need our legal counsel. That's what he's here for, is to give us good advice on matters exactly like this, whether they are within the law or not within the law. It would be very helpful.
Anyone else feel that way? Dora?
I don't have any problem giving it to
Ken?
Bob to look at it.
Dave?
I still have issues that I want to bring forward, even if it's,
I guess we have to clear the hurdles one at a time. So,
Well, can we get all of the issues out now? Is that possible to do?
yeah, because this has gone on
Long time.
a long time. What else do we have for issues? David?
And David has
His comment sheet.
I've prepared
So-
comments, we can give them to the town attorney. I think that there are significant issues with the way this is drafted, and I've articulated that before.
Thank you for your comments.
Anyone else? Okay. Dora, what are your other concerns that you
No, that it's just that. I think for the most part, it's a good policy. It's just that issue of the boards and committees that.
Can I ask a bit more specific question on that? Is there consensus? I mean, does this board, do you want committees and boards to have the ability to utilize social media under as an affiliation of the town, as a town committee? Because if there's no way, if there's not a way that someone's ever going to feel comfortable with that, then it's easy to just set it aside and say, okay, no board or committee will have but if it's worth looking, because there's a sense that there's a value in a committee there could be a value in a committee having access to social media, so we should frame the policy in a way that allows it. Then we can do that. But I don't want to go through and kind of with reviewing the policy with a framework that committees and boards would have access, but then really the consensus of the committee, of the board, of this body being, we still don't, it's worth it. It's not worth the risk, because there's always a risk.
I think that if town departments want to have social media sites and gather input, that's a fine use of social media. I don't think boards and committees should be communicating via social media sites until the legislature changed the open meeting law.
I would like to again hear from boards and committees and other places that are using social media successfully, because I think we're making this decision right now still without having put the benefits that it has for boards and committees to do their work. And I don't want to make a decision based on reaction without having the benefits of it, how it either helps people gather public input in a way that conforms to open meeting law, or is more of a hindrance than a help. And we still haven't presented that piece.
I think we'll put this on our agenda for October
Second?
2nd.
Did you
That'll
get a
give-
full answer to the question?
Yes, we did.
No, she didn't.
Oh, you didn't?
Well,
Well,
there's no
I-
consensus, that's for
There's
sure.
not a
There's no
consensus, so we just
consensus,
move
no.
forward.
You know,
That's okay, so we just move forward with a policy
I
that
think-
allows it, and you can take it out if you want at some point.
Yeah, well, I think that if...
Edit it later.
I think it's a useful tool. I think we just need to make sure that, it's a tool that's being used properly. Right, Christopher?
Yes.
Excuse me, John. Are you good with that?
I'm on board.
Okay. John?
Just a suggestion. Of course, most of the electronic social media are very new. But in history, we have the concept of a publication of record. And towns or jurisdictions customarily designate a publication of record to post public notices. And it might be helpful if a policy articulated about social media included the possibility of designating certain sites or certain areas where information can be published as a publication of record or a site of record or something like that.
The Reformer is our publication of record.
Can I just ask a question to clarify? It seems like you're talking about boards and committees and town departments separately because they have different expectations, or is it just because there are two conversations happening at the same time? I just want to make sure I'm understanding it.
Well, we have, the library has the police department, fire department, they have their own web pages.
Right.
And I think what the major concern is boards and committees.
I think his question is why, which is
Right.
mine is, to be clear, it's mine as well. I don't understand why we're parsing out boards and committees separate from other groups.
People are well able to speak on their own, but I would say because a department doesn't have open meeting,
Policy.
they don't have a board, they don't take votes, they keep public record, but they don't have votes, those types of things, that a board or a committee would. So there's not a question of, you're not going to have the Public Works Department having a discussion on, and even if they did, it wouldn't matter if they had a discussion on Facebook about whether or not they're going to pave Sherwood Circle in the next 200 years.
Yeah.
Because boards and committees are subject to the open meeting law, and
Right, I just
we
wanted to
shouldn't
make
be
sure.
having dialogue in a way that violates the open meeting law relating to things that are properly before boards and committees. That's my concern.
Dora?
Well, and I also want to add that, that town departments and staff are employees and they're supervised. And boards and committees are political bodies that are kind of overseen by the select board, but they're acting a lot on their own, on the things that they do. So they don't have the same sort of, restrictions as being employees that staff does. And most of what comes out of town departments is policy that's been set by the select board.
So, and I'm sorry, I apologize, Barb, I know you have a long day. But is this policy, if it's approved, will it apply to the department websites, the police department, the library?
Not websites, because websites are
I'm
different
sorry,
from social media.
sites, social media sites.
It would. There is a question with regard to how it would fit with the library, because the library board sets policy, and that has been raised to me as a question.
It would actually apply to the town's website as well. Those are the two places that it would be the town's website and the
Town's
social media.
website, right.
Yeah. Yeah, I heard that question as well.
Yes, John?
It might also apply to the Finance Committee's website, which is publicized, and I believe on the town's website. I mean, it's just an
However-
extension. And I just wanted to comment when you responded that the Brattleboro Reformer is our publication of record. What I meant to suggest was that perhaps the legal counsel or the select board could revisit the idea of publications of record and make some similar dispensation around social media.
But, yeah.
Are you talking about putting out printed things that's been on social media?
No, I'm not talking about the idea of printing what's on the social media. I'm talking about recognizing that when something goes on the internet, it is being published.
Just to be clear, the Finance Committee is also kind of an odd, it would be like the Human Services Committee, in that it is not overseen by the Select Board, it is overseen by representative town meeting, so you guys can do whatever you want.
Thank you.
And that piece is in this policy, that it be made clear to people that what they post, there should be no expectation of privacy for what people post, that it becomes a matter of public record and can be published. That's right in here.
Okay, we're going to revisit this on October 2nd. I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
I'm going to adjourn.
All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.